Check out this print. It's so meta. It's a film print I took on 35mm of my daughter taking a film photo with my Yashica that I've had since I was a teenager at one of my favorite weird locations, an abandoned velodrome. There's just too many things for me to love in one shot. And another cool aspect is that I scanned and digitized this print by myself with my camera. This print is from a few years ago when I scanned my first batch of negatives with my old Sony camera, which I don't miss, and an old Canon zoom lens, which I actually do miss, with some extension tubes in between. I just put the film on a crappy light table and stood the lens right on it, like balanced the lens right against the film. Terrible technique. Don't tell any film preservationists. So I set out to make a more permanent film scanning setup. I know these things exist. I know you can get mounts for your camera and backlit film advance levers, but what fun is there in spending a bunch of money on one of those setups when I just wanted to figure out how to make it myself with stuff I already had? And what do I have laying around in my garage, like we all have laying around in our garages? Vintage film enlargers. Wait, you don't have a vintage classic film enlarger laying around? Then why do I have two? Maybe I have your enlarger. That's why I have two. I have your enlarger as well, right? Or maybe I just have a problem collecting junk. So back in the old days, in high school, I had a film developing lab in my basement. I would shoot my film on an old loaned Nicormac camera that I totally destroyed and wore out, and develop the negatives in my basement. If you're interested in shooting film and interested in shooting black and white, it's very easy to develop your negatives at home. You don't need a lot of supplies. And usually these supplies you can find on classifieds or like Craigslist or Marketplace pretty regularly. I recommend it. And then I would develop my film to get my negatives. So a bit of a background, I don't know if you need a refresher, but a negative is literally a negative. Light comes through the lens of the camera and projects onto the negative. The brighter the light that's coming through, like the sky or my pasty white skin, the more it burns into the negative, making the negative darker. Darker areas like a dark rock or something black reflect less light in the real world. So that light coming through the lens will burn less into the negative, and that area will actually stay brighter. That's why a negative is a negative. And then back in the lab, under the glow of a red light, I would sell my body. Develop my prints. Sorry, I'm getting two very different periods of my life mixed up. So I'd put my negatives in up here, and then they would project down here onto light sensitive paper, making another big negative. But this time, a negative of your negative is a positive. It's the circle of light. And the red light that I talked about and that you see in films and stuff is real. And it's the light that you can do print work with. So you can see what you're doing. You can see your image forming when it's in the developer bath. And it also makes for some cool movie scenes. Developing was fun, and I even did my own glamour shots as a teenager. Everyone thought they were funny at the time, but now I get asked, is that how you actually dressed? I'm realizing that so much time has passed, my parody photo shoot is now closer to the time I was parodying than to today. But you're not here for my nostalgia for the darkroom or any of that sort of stuff. So, to the point, scanning film. You need to get your camera overhead. You can do it with your tripod. My tripod is old and it doesn't quick tilt or any of that sort of stuff, and it's very fussy. And even if it did, micro adjusting its height is tricky. Takes up a lot of space, it's hard to put on a table. So I wanted a better way and a more permanent way, and a way that made me more excited to scan film, having a semi-permanent workstation for film scanning. I also have these magic arms that I do for footage like this where I'm overhead of my workstation. But anytime you make an adjustment, they have a big sag to them. They're not fine camera control. What can give us a permanent setup and very granular, very fine focus control? A film enlarger? My old film enlarger. And since I'm not interested in making prints at the moment and just want digital versions of these, I was willing to totally tear apart an Enlarger to make this work. And so the best surprise is that it took about 3 minutes to do. Turns out the head of this Enlarger is held on by 1/3/8 screw, which if you know anything about tripods and tripod heads, that's the main screw that holds a tripod head onto a tripod base. And I thought I had discovered the best hack in all of history. I felt so proud of inventing a new use for Enlargers. That is until I downloaded the original user manual for this Enlarger that I have and found a section where it literally says how to use this Enlarger as a photocopying machine, how to copy prints, documents, whatever you needed to do in the old days. So really what I had thought was inventing a hack was just rediscovering a well thought out, already existing use for an Enlarger. So whatever, I didn't think of mounting a camera on an Enlarger first. Fine. But what I am gonna do, which isn't listed in here, is I'm gonna scan my negatives with it. So I've converted all my day-to-day mounts that I use for photography or YouTube to Arca Swiss. It's very generic. If you buy a cheap tripod ball head on Amazon, it will be Arca Swiss. So I have lots of these ball heads hanging around. In fact, there's a cheap Amazon ball head filming me right now. And when you see videos of me up in my cabin, I have a cheap ball head that's clamped onto an old microphone stand. It's not sexy, but it gets the job done. It's actually the best because the base is heavy, but it has a small footprint. Anyways, so I can dedicate one of these ball heads to this Enlarger. It just screws on in a couple seconds and then I can get my camera overhead. Just make sure that your camera is actually pointing straight down, which is a little bit tricky. My preferred method is super silly, and I've made a video about this. It's to simply just tie a string to a nut and hang it from visually the center of your lens and let it come to rest down on your surface, and then reframe your camera around that. And then any other small tweaks you can just do in your software later. In my first round, I used a Canon zoom lens with extension tubes. This time around, I borrowed from a friend a couple Canon 100mm macro lenses, so we're gonna see that together for the first time on these prints. So next, we need to hold the negatives. If you look at negatives, they often don't want to lay flat. So you need some sort of holder. You could use glass if you wanted to, but the problem with glass is that every surface that you shoot through when you're scanning negatives collects dust. And when you're scanning negatives, dust is your enemy. So in the past, I made a negative holder out of foam core, but it was super terrible. It was like garbage. 2 layers of foam core with like a slightly bigger than 35mm window that I could scan the negatives through. It was absolute garbage. And since that didn't work very well, I started to look around on Thingiverse, which is a website where people can upload 3D printable files. And on there, I found some design files for a 35mm negative holder, and I asked my son to 3D print them for me. So I have this 3D printed 35mm negative holder. It clamps together with simple elastics, and it holds it really nice and flat. So I'll link to those design files down below, and you should just print your own. If you don't have a 3D printer or someone you know doesn't have one, pretty much every library has one. So just take your library card, and my God, you better have a library card. Just make sure it's printed in black plastic so you don't get any weird color casts or reflections or light bouncing around. I just have to bug my son now to print me one that will hold 120 film or medium format film. And finally, the last part of our setup is a backlight. You need to backlight your negative in order to scan it. The good thing is that film quality LEDs are very common now and very affordable. So if you have a little LED mini panel or something like that, just make sure you have a couple layers of diffusion to really soften the light before it gets to your negative. But make sure that that diffusion isn't too close to your film, because if you use paper or something like that, if it's on the same focal plane as your negative, you'll actually pick up that texture. A white shopping bag or kitchen garbage bags, that plastic, if it's stretched and tight, has no grain to it, and it's actually a really great diffusion. And to shim up my negative holder, I have a little bin in my office of scrap 2x4s and 2x2 offcuts. I basically make mini apple boxes like you would have on a film set to get under things to lift things up. I just sanded them smooth so I don't get slivers, and I use them all over the place just to like lift things up or rig things up in an interesting way. So this setup is complicated, but you don't even need to do anything like this. You can literally tape a piece of garbage, white garbage bag onto your window and hold your negative against that with your fingers to scan it to take a photo. You can do it with an iPhone. You can get VR goggles and use the little lens in them to create a little mini enlarger. There's so many ways to get negatives into your camera without having to mail them away. And all of these scans are totally great. Like, look again at this print I did with extension tubes. It's not perfect, but for me, it's only stuff I'll notice, and I can't wait to get it up on the wall. These are the first scans from the station. As I'm recording this, I haven't even seen these, so I am so literally excited. This is Jesse from the future, and I'm just looking through my first scans with this setup, and they are great. They are clear and crisp, where my old scans were soft on the edges. A weird motion blur, these are sharp from corner to corner. You can see every bit of grain and dust. But in my old scans, I added a bit of grain on top to hide a bit of this, where this is the way it should be. And to me, these are gallery quality scans. All I want to do is inspire you to shoot film, develop it at your house, and then be able to scan it and post it on Instagram or your website or wherever it is very simply, and enjoy it, make it a hobby, make it a part of your process, because that's what the creative life is about, is finding your process, finding your way to get your ideas in front of people to see, whatever it takes, however ugly a rig it is. I'm gonna make myself cry. I inspire myself so much sometimes that it's just beautiful, and I feel like I'm gonna tear up because I love art so much, almost as much as you.